So a couple of things as to why IA mapping is important. And I think a lot of y'all hit this on the head as you talked through it and submitted your comments and your thoughts. What it really does is allow you to take a moment to think about all the different elements of your website from a content and from a structural standpoint. What are your goals on your site? As most of you mentioned, the University's Edge site is not very complex. It's really a page or two, but a lot of their calls to action drive towards that connect or the contact portion of the site. And of course, for a apartment website, or perhaps even a business to business website that maybe sells professional services from one business to another, that transaction really usually is that contact us or get connected with somebody on our team. And so you all saw that on the University's Edge website. It was, contact us or apply now or schedule a tour. And so I would expect, as y'all do your own IA maps this evening, that is one of your actions as well within your site. So that doing an IA map allows you to take a moment to think about your goals for your personas, the things that are worth highlighting based off of the type of site that you're building. What might your users' main goals be? And so you can jot those down on paper and see how you might structure your content to fit those needs. What calls to action might be on page to page, and do you just kind of by looking at your IA map, stop and see, oh, I maybe have too many calls to action on this page, or I maybe am repeating the same call to action every time, and so is there a better way maybe to do that on the site? And also, what sections of content do you think are important to highlight? What is important to highlight as the first thing on the page for that user to see? Usually if you kind of stack your content in your IA map from top to bottom, the top is going to be the most important, and the thing that is at the bottom of the page might be your least important, or might be the call to action after somebody has looked at your site, comes to the very bottom of it, scrolls to the bottom of it, and sees that contact form or sees that conversion option that's available on your site. So it really just, as many of you mentioned, allows you to take that moment to stop and think critically about your content, about your users' goals, and about how they might navigate in your website. It also allows you to think about the structure for your wireframe and give you more structure for your wireframe. It gives you that foundational, those foundational elements from a content perspective, from a what's important on your site, and how you might be able to highlight that within your wireframe. And so that will allow you to create an even more detailed wireframe because you've stopped and planned before you just jump right into sketching. That's important for the people you're working with as a part of a team, or if you're working with a client, to be able to think about the content, think about the information that's going to be displayed on the page. And then as you move into wireframes, that gives you a great starting point to be able then to think structurally, spatially, how you're going to lay out that wireframe. It also allows you to see how complex that site might be before you actually start sketching it all out on paper. One of the more challenging moments I had was redesigning one of our healthcare applications, and I went through the same exercise y'all did with that couple of page website with University's Edge for a full 50 to 100 page product for that I was working on. And I clicked through every page, found every dead link, found where users were dropping off, and then mapped that out and saw how complex of a web we had woven for our clients, for our patients. And so it allowed us to see how bad it was to start, and then how we could change the sitemap, change the IA to make a better user experience. And then finally, when you're collaborating with others, having a well-structured IA map gives your colleagues in development or those who are dedicated to content writing a great starting point to jump into their work as a developer, as a content writer. If others know what to expect from the navigation, from the hierarchy on the page, then that allows them to jumpstart their work sooner and ultimately allows you to launch your product faster. So hopefully that was helpful as providing some more context as to why IA mapping is important. and some of the videos that you may have watched or that you'll interact with in this module, you'll see that IA mapping was around in the early 2000s and even back in the 1970s as a term and as a way of thinking. And so it's been around for a while as part of the UI UX process. And therefore, a lot of people may have shoved it to the side and forgotten about it for some of the more sexier and appealing aspects of UI UX, like jumping into high fidelity visuals and prototypes like we'll do in this course. But it's a great foundational start for any website. And I hope you enjoy it like I have the first time I jumped into IA mapping, where I could actually think critically about the content and the structure of my website and creating a great user experience. Let me also share maybe 2 XD tips that will be very helpful for this project. Like I said, as opposed to what we did last Thursday night with sketching out quickly that IA and that sitemap from an existing website, you're actually going to start to lay out that IA map for your new site. So you're starting from scratch. And so you need to think about, what's the important content that I want to highlight? And of course, for this project, there are some required things that you need to highlight. But based off what you've chosen, whether you're that early young professional mid-20s user in Phoenix or in Austin or in Charlotte, some of the more popular areas that have been chosen for this project, what would be important for them to highlight? Is it the neighborhood? Is it the amenities? And so this allows you to think critically as to how you might structure your page, your content within that. These 2 steps in the process will help you tremendously as you get started into your IA map that we'll be building in Adobe XD. And so the first thing I would encourage you to do is install the plugin called FlowKit. I'll demo how that works here in a second, but this plugin really makes it easy for you to create connection points, create those lines that you were hand drawing in your IA map last week digitally here in Adobe XD. And then also too, we've talked about repeatable components, and these kind of look like buttons, but they're also, for me, being leveraged as pieces of my puzzle for my IA map and for my legend. And it allows me to quickly drag and drop these components and be able to quickly build out an IA map. So let me jump into where I'm at for my IA map. I've chosen to do a new idea for my website for an apartment complex called Railroad Flats of Chattanooga. My wife and my family and I love to go to Chattanooga, to the mountains, to the aquarium that's there. And there's a really cool part of downtown along the railroad tracks that was developing last time that we were there. And Chattanooga is just a beautiful city here in Tennessee. And so what I've done is I've just mapped out that I would love to include social actions here within kind of my IA map. I'd love to have global actions of what specials are available, encouraging them to apply now, maybe a owner login. Then I've just broken out the individual pages that I want to include on the site. For me, it's floor plans, amenities, locations, FAQs, and contacts. Now, that might look different for each of you depending on what site or user or location that you have chosen to work on. I've got my legend here, which is helpful for me to know as I hand this off to a client. And again, this is way more polished than those hand sketches that you did last Thursday. And so for this module, this is what we're going to be building, is inside of Adobe XD, creating a professional looking IA map that is a piece of the larger puzzle for UI UX design that you can hand off to a client, to a colleague that you're working with, and they can get an understanding as you present it as to what they would expect to see on their website. So I still have to build out my homepage, and let me just show you how I leverage those components and the FlowKit plugin here. So I've got FlowKit installed. Again, if you go over to plugins in this bottom left corner, you hit the plus sign, you're going to be brought up to this extra window. If you just type in FlowKit, it'll be the only one that comes up, and it'll give you a little overview of what to expect, what's available in the site are in the plugin and how you might use it. I've already got it installed, so we'll go there. I've also created my components that I want to have repeatable. So I just have the component that is going to identify a page for me, so the pages within my site. I have another component that's going to identify what is content on my site, and then another component that's going to identify what is the action on my site. And so all I did was I created those components the same way we did maybe as a button. And let me just create a new example here for you really quickly. So I've just drawn a square. I maybe want to change that up a little bit. Maybe let me just say that this is a component. And we'll just create this very quickly so you can see here. And we'll change the content size. And again, we walked through this last project. All I'm doing here is I'm kind of centering it here within my project. I know that I want it to appear maybe 20 pixels from the left here, and let me just shrink this in here to be 20 pixels. So I need to go -14, and you can see that sits snug and center within my square here. I'm just going to group it and change the padding. Again, we've talked about this for creating buttons within your last project you had. Then I can quickly add this to the panel here. So just by hitting the plus sign, and now a component is here, and I can drag and drop and change this out to new page title, and it's going to respond and change however I need to. And that's what I did basically for these three options here. I need to build out my home page. So what would be important for me to include on my home page? So a piece of content that's going to be on this is perhaps an about the apartments section. Perhaps I'm going to have another piece of content on this page that is highlighting the neighborhood that this apartment complex is in. Perhaps I want another piece of content that is the gallery. And so you can see, different from wireframes where you're worried about how you're going to lay this out. Here in IA, you're just kind of focusing on what are the important things that I want to highlight within this page or within this kind of feature of the website. Let me also add testimonials. So for me, my target demographic is also maybe a younger professional who's moving to Chattanooga for the first time, perhaps. And so testimonials would be something that could sell this apartment complex. Word of mouth is the most classic form of advertising. And so I want to highlight testimonials. And I also want to have a contact form here on the homepage as well. So I feel pretty confident that my homepage is not going to be too overpowering. There's just enough information for the user to make a decision. I have about my apartment complex. I have a little bit about my neighborhood I want to highlight. I want to highlight pictures in a gallery. I want to highlight testimonials, and I want to have a contact page. Now, a home page without an action really is just information, right? So I want to go through here and think about what actions I might want to have available within each of these sections, perhaps. And maybe some sections don't have actions, like maybe the about apartments doesn't have an action. But in the neighborhood page or section, I might want to add an action that links over to my existing location page over here. And so I'm just going to say, because I've already legended this out and I know this yellow button is an action, I'm going to include it here within neighborhood. Maybe on the gallery, I also want to include an action that is a link to my floor plans page. So I'm going to add an action there for floor plans. And then maybe I also want to add an action for amenities here as well. So maybe in this gallery, I'm going to highlight my floor plans. I'm going to highlight the amenities, and I'm going to be able to create quick actions that go into some of the interior pages of my site. Now you can see, compared to how I have this kind of nice and structured here, we need to clean this up a little bit. So what I can do with that plugin of FlowKit is actually open that and see that I can add a straight, a curve, a snake line, whatever I need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up, make sure kind of it's nice and tidy there. What I've been doing is moving this in about 10 pixels or so, about 20 pixels or so in from this edge. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on both of these and then just highlight the curve here. And so what it's going to do is it's kind of going to look a little weird here because it doesn't really line up. And so what I can do is I can change the direction in which this angle appears by sliding the edge back and forth. And so it gives me a little bit of movement. Now you can do these all by hand if you like, but I like to use something that's going to expedite my process a little bit. My line width, I can change that actually over here if I want to in my panel. I'm going to make that two pixels there like I have for each of these existing. Perhaps I want the border to be similar also, so I can grab the eyedropper and just select that color that I'm already using. And again, you can change that as you need to there also. So I've just selected my line width over here, and I can change the color also. We're going to change this border color to be this gray that we're using. Now, I'm not using the arrows in any of these. Now, whether we're getting into user flows, maybe you might use arrows. But for this, I'm just stacking it here, kind of showing how it might nest. So I could choose left, arrow, circle, different things that I can choose there. My right, I'm going to turn that off. And of course, I already have the color added here. Let me just double check that I'm doing that right. Again, we're doing it on the fly, so a little trial and error here also. What I'll do is, again, you can set this up and how it's gonna work on your site, whichever way that makes sense. Again, you just want to communicate a very clean, organized deliverable for your client that you're working with. And so here I am. I'm just going to duplicate this then now that I have that structure completed, and I'm just going to build my way down the page, and I can create nested elements here as well. And really just create an easy to use, really nice, clean information architecture map. And so hopefully this has been just maybe a helpful way to show a plugin that's really easy to use and really easy to be able to generate these components, these lines really quickly, so that you can make a really well-structured, well thought out user map. And again, it creates for a really great deliverable for your client as well. And so maybe if you worked on your mood board and you've got a color and a color palette you want to work with, this would be a great opportunity to maybe showcase that. That's exactly what I've done here, showcasing this dark kind of off black color that I have. But then also I know that Tennessee loves their orange based off their University of Tennessee. And so I've got a vibrant orange as one of my primary colors within my color palette. And so I just like to highlight that here. I'm also including my logo here as well that I created, Railroad Flats of Chattanooga. And so here you go. I've got just a nice IA map of Railroad Flats Chattanooga that I can use to then think about how I might structurally lay this out as I visualize my wireframes. I can hand this off to a client, to a business partner, and they can look at this and easily be able to see how this site's going to lay out. So again, in this project, you're just looking at what type of content do I want to highlight on each of these pages? What actions do I want to include? What's going to make my user experience successful based off of the location that I've chosen, the type of apartment that I'm building for, and then also the users that I've selected here. We're kind of using the term sitemap and IA map interchangeably. In the industry, they kind of mean the same thing. Those lines have become pretty blurry, but you can see how in this example of the Center for Food Safety, how they've used color to emphasize, what is a dynamic database page versus a static page that's editable versus an email template, and just a very beautiful sitemap that they've created here. Here's another one where they've highlighted the home page, the social media links, the primary navigation, the types of content and nav that's going to be available within each of those pages or portions of the home page. And then also here as well, I've included an example that I made from grad school where I IA mapped and I structured out the Upper Sandusky Community Library page. And so maybe a little bit more in depth here of how you can structure your sitemap, structure your IA map, and the legend that kind of accompanies it as well. Again, based off your decisions you made for your location, your user base, your type of apartment, it's going to look different. And so hopefully this is helpful to walk through some of the importance of IA mapping and where it falls in, some helpful Adobe XD tricks, how you might lay out your IA map, and then an overview of this module as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you submit, and I'll talk with y'all later. All right, thanks everybody.